Welcome to Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. I'm your host, Will Bachman, and I'm here today with Marshall Butler, who's the Chief Marketing Officer for Wealth and Investment Management at Wells Fargo. Marshall, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Will. Thanks for the invitation. It's great to talk to you.
So, Marshall, it's great to catch up again. We met years and years ago when you were at BlackRock, and now you're at Wells Fargo. We talked about today covering the world of data and how it's revolutionizing marketing, particularly for wealth and investment management firms. Let's start out with why is data so important, and what's going on with data in terms of wealth and investment management?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, great to reconnect. Will, as you said, it's been a while since we worked together at BlackRock, and yeah, good to connect today. So, the world of marketing, has undergone, like a lot of industries or business disciplines, tremendous transformation over the last 10 years in the digital space. And I think, at the root of it is data and how data really upends the old adage. If you recall, the CEO is talking to his chief marketing officer and says to that individual, "I know that half of your budget is wasted. I just don't know which half." And that's just not true anymore. Everything is really measurable and understandable. The expression that I like, which is a little trite, but I still think it is appropriate, is that data in the 21st century is like oil in the 18th century. To a large degree, it is untapped. It is worth very little if it is unrefined, but it's absolutely essential and fuels modern business. And I think that's definitely true in the experience economy. And if you think about tech giants, really their whole business model is data, and everything that they're doing around customer data is fascinating and very relevant to the world in which I've built my career in wealth and investment management. And if you think about successful tech companies, they've really purposely built processes and products that generate data, not as a byproduct of the operation, but really as an asset that is developed and then can be monetized either directly or indirectly. If you think about what that means for us in investment management or wealth advisory, needless to say, there is a profound amount of data that we have available by virtue of how we serve our clients. Now, if it can be harnessed, and I need to be, really thoughtful here, because of course, there needs to be really strict accordance with regulatory guidelines and privacy requirements. But if it can be harnessed to serve clients more effectively in a more personalized or intuitive manner, it can be extremely powerful. Now, again, it's not without its risks, as I mentioned, around privacy concerns. But I think that there is an opportunity, with data to provide real tangible value to clients through marketing.
So, wealth and investment management seems to be a hard thing to market because it's so intangible what the service offering is, and everybody wants to kind of say the same thing, like, oh, we're going to keep your money secure, but we're going to get you a good, really, really good return, and you're probably mostly going after a lot of the same high net worth individuals. So talk to me a little bit about how wealth and investment management firms are using data, and we can go through different parts of it. But let's first start with just understanding the customers and the different customer segments and different customer needs, and then using that to figure out which of those you want to position yourselves for. Can you talk about how data is being used in those areas?
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Will, it can be challenging insofar as in many ways, or it is a utterly non-commoditized business, because the nature of the service that we provide to affluent or high net worth or ultra high net worth or institutional clients is so personalized But as you point out, the messaging can be really complex in terms of how you articulate your value differently than others, which is where I think modern marketing, the digital environment, and data, kind of creates the opportunity to sort of say, all right, there's the message, but then what's the medium that you're using to express that message, and where are they going to find it? So, for example, I work at a large bank. As you mentioned, one of the benefits of our business model is we can prospect for potential wealth management clients from within our retail banking population, and because we know who they are, we can use first party data to find them not just within our own channels and environment, but also in the broader digital world. We can take information around customers 100% anonymized, and then sort of upload them to sort of streaming services, whether it's through Google or Facebook and their ecosystems, and then identify those folks out there in the real world. We all know that it's often, if not always, more profitable to sell more to an existing client than it is to acquire new clients. But our ability to find our customers, to find Wells Fargo customers in the broader world and say, that's great, we know that they have a mortgage with us. We know that they have a credit card with us. Wouldn't it be terrific if we could serve them even more extensively in the wealth management space? And wouldn't it be great if we could find them in the broader world where they may be shopping for those kinds of services? I think that's particularly exciting. On the other side of things, on the sort of the B2B side of things, maybe in the investment management world, the ability to use data for leads is also incredible. I think there's certainly lots of ways to drive leads. Search engine marketing is of course a highly efficient way of doing so, and we certainly do a lot of that. But you want to make sure though that you're driving qualified leads, and there's a terrific opportunity to use data and AI to improve the productivity of the front line. Through your CRM solution, lead scoring, and prioritization. We're able to determine the characteristics and behaviors of a lead that is most likely to convert, and therefore, creating really valuable leads that allows the front line to be really efficient in their use of time. And what we've seen, and I'm confident we're not alone in the industry, is really a double-digit improvement in frontline productivity based on sort of data-grounded lead scoring and prioritization of leads that come in.
Give me some examples of that, of what that lead scoring looks like in practice. And so if I'm a frontline employee, what sorts of data am I looking at, and then maybe kind of trace back where that data came from and how it got scored and so forth?
Yeah. Well, we're able to sort of to ascertain based on a user pattern of engagements, a lead that is most likely to convert. Now, look, in our industry, this isn't like buying toothpaste. It's a highly considered purchase. So chances are you're not. I mean, sometimes this happens, but chances are, your first click is not like, great, I'm ready to buy. Oftentimes, it's really, and I think where we've been most successful, it's really a nurturing, set of activities. So, for example, let me think of something that might be relevant here. I think, and this actually really gets into kind of how we think about client journeys. But let me give you an example of something that we've thought about. So let's imagine we have an affluent customer out there. Let's assume that they bank with us, or generic large financial institution. And so therefore we have some first party data. this individual is worried about inflation, as a number of, or many people are in the current environment, and wonders about what that could mean, for her portfolio. Let's assume she doesn't have an advisor, but she's thinking, "Gosh, I'm concerned about inflation. I don't have a financial advisor, but I don't know. Are they worth it? Is a financial advisor worth it?" And so she Googles exactly that. Are financial advisors worth it? Well, she's then sort of served, content, through through the sort of Google ecosystem, which sort of addresses exactly that question, and it directs her perhaps to a microsite to learn more about the benefits of a financial advisor. And so she reads through that, and it's interesting, but she doesn't really do anything with it. But again, let's assume she's been cookied. She's a customer of the bank, and so therefore, we're able to serve her additional content, throughout her day. And so let's assume later in the day she's on Facebook, and she sees content from her bank, including a financial preparedness quiz, perhaps on the topic of, are you prepared for rising levels of inflation? So she completes the quiz, and perhaps the ad unit then asks her if she's ready for a consultation on the topic. Again, maybe not quite ready, but she likes the content enough that she signs up for the newsletter to learn more. And this is when we then get into the nurturing activities. She selects topics of interest to her and the frequency she would like to see those topics. And now over time, we then drip on her with content. Perhaps this goes on for months, 6 months, maybe a year, but over time, she's ready. You know what? I'm ready to speak with somebody. And then she does schedule a free consultation with an advisor. Now, the advisor in the CRM solution that the advisor is using, the data that is piped through, knows, okay, this is the content that this individual has been engaging in. She's interested in the inflation topic. And so therefore, that advisor is better prepared to have a thoughtful conversation with that prospect when the time comes. So the advisor meets with her, let's say, they have a good meeting, invites her to a seminar to learn more about inflation protected portfolios, for example, and says, hey, would you like to invite a friend? And so this individual says, great, I'll invite my friend Sam. And then all of a sudden, a new lead journey begins. We have, contact information, email contact information for Sam, and we can also then begin dripping content on that individual with the intent of driving the lead. So hopefully, that based on that example, you can see how, ideally, this is a value-added set of interactions. It's a value-added customer journey for the prospect, which simultaneously provides us with helpful data to help that financial advisor to convert that prospect into an actual client, but having done so in a way that they're adding value along the way. Now that's the win-win here. The digital environment enables us to capture data on the individual, but that's only really useful if it is actually valuable to that prospect. And if it's valuable to that prospect, it should be valuable to the advisor. So that's an example which I think is pretty exciting. And honestly, Will, if you think back to the days in which you and I first worked together 10 years ago, none of this would have been possible, which makes it a pretty exciting set of development.
So in that example, a few questions about it. So it sounds like somewhere the computer system, some kind of intelligence, it might not be a person looking at it, but somewhere the system actually would know all of these different things about the person. That, okay, we served this person this Facebook quiz. This person has visited the website 3 times. They've looked on these specific articles. They've, they looked at our, they signed up for this newsletter and they've opened these specific things and clicked on these specific links. So the system has that. If an advisor speaks to that person, are they seeing all those different interactions, or are they more just sort of seeing something that's relatively synthesized and says this person cares about inflation?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so it is more often than not the latter, because of course advisors are busy professionals. It may not be particularly helpful for them to know how they answer to question 6 on the quiz, right? And so I think that through a combination of and usually it's some discernment on the part of a sales strategy professional or a marketer. We're able to say, look, conversations with advisors, what's the information that's going to be most helpful to you? Well, look, I'd love to know these kinds of things. I think from what the system is able to do, though, over time, as it learns, is that clients with this kind of profile, clients that engage with us across, let's call it 7, 8 different touches, are more likely to convert. So what this enables us to do, if nothing else, is to provide a scoring system. Hey, this is a terrific lead. You should jump on this one immediately because they have exhibited behaviors 1 through 6, which we know, based on past experience, tend to be the behaviors that convert relatively quickly. On the other hand, maybe this lead, well, they've exhibited, behaviors 1 through 3. They're a moderate lead. I wouldn't put it on the top of your to-do list, but perhaps, if you have time available, give them a call, or let's keep an eye on them and see if they engage further. So that's where the sales team productivity gains really come into play, because you then have got your sales teams focused on leads that tend to convert, versus them sort of chasing down everything when in the broad universe of leads, there may be some that are less valuable than others.
And do these algorithms, are they becoming sort of just AI-driven black boxes so that there's not really necessarily human intelligence behind it anymore, of saying it's more just the AI is looking at which leads it converted and then doing a bunch of sophisticated, calculations to figure out what are the different indicators that suggest that a lead is likely, but not someone actually trying to, just program that in there. It's more just the AI figuring it out.
Yeah. No, there's still a massive role for human engagement. I mean, I think the large CRM providers out there in the world have created extremely powerful tools which are very easy to use, and obviously we use several of them. But in my experience, that there. As you're going through the deployment of a new CRM solution or a new marketing, sort of leads management marketing solution, there is a really key piece of the process where you're sitting down again with sort of marketer who's sort of setting all this up with sales leader to say, okay, look, let's just simply talk about the kind of leads that you want, and then let's try to ascertain what the behaviors might be. Again, there's going to be some experience and knowledge based on what the marketer has seen that has worked. The CRM provider no doubt has a perspective here, but at the end of the day, the actual lead scoring and the character and the quality and the characteristics and look, this is certainly an ongoing a debate, tricky situation between sales and marketing. How do we know these leads are valuable? And I think there is a lot of discernment and qualitative assessment that has to happen in partnership with the sales team. Of course, no marketer wants to hear, yeah, great, your campaign, generated 100 leads, but they're all garbage. So that nobody wants that. So there is, that process of the lead scoring is going to be informed by the algorithm, but it is ultimately going to be, something that has to be aligned on and agreed to between, the sales leadership and the marketing leadership to ensure that these are the kinds of leads we actually want.
I'm curious about what would be crummy leads where it might, on appearance, look good. Maybe the person has signed up for a newsletter and they attended a seminar or they read a bunch of articles, but if you actually, but they never convert. Are there like categories like that that just tend to be really, crummy leads that maybe in the old days you might have spent time on, but with the more sophistication today, you could identify those?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good example. I mean, I think, let me sort of a very generic example. You know, let's say, typically, and it's hard, right? I mean, you want the more data you can capture, the better, right? Because that allows you to be smarter. So in the past, if somebody said, we may ask a question around investable assets. What are your investable assets? And because of course, if they are, a mass affluent customer versus an emerging, high net worth customer, the content that we're likely to serve them is going to be different based on their sort of financial circumstances. But let's say they answer that question to the tune of, hey, I've got 5 million in investable assets. Well, in the past, a sales leader may have said, "Wow, that sounds like an awesome prospect. Let's hop on that immediately." Well, if we're able to have, however, sort of dig deeper on who that individual is, look, it could be that they've already got multiple relationships with their financial advisors. It could be that they're not ready to seek out a new provider, that they just engaged in the marketplace and like to read content and therefore are interested in additional content, but they're really not in the shopping stage. So now it could be a good lead over time that we could nurture, but that would be an example of, on the surface, may look like a terrific opportunity because of the scale of their investment assets, but it may be a long conversion cycle, and so perhaps they're not ready for a sales touch just yet. It may be better to, through a much more low cost method, for us to market and nurture them over time until we know they've exhibited more behaviors that suggest that they are ready.
Could you give me a little background and, not sort of Wells Fargo specific, but just into kind of how people in the industry think? What are the different sort of tiers of customers, from just sort of the mass market, going to get a basic checking account, to the highest net worth people? What are the different like tiers in there? And
Yeah.
then for each tier, what's sort of the typical industry standard kind of services or products that are most commonly thought appropriate for that level of person, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the industry has, to a large extent, gravitated around more or less the same definition. So if you start at the lower end of the spectrum, you may have what I would call an emerging affluent. These are individuals who are not yet affluent, and let's define affluent as having around 250 in investable assets, and let's assume that that's X their 401k or retirement accounts. An emerging affluent, however, is a great longer term prospect. They may not have that level of investable assets, but we know, based on their education, the industry in which they're working, the kinds of financial activity they've already undertaken, that they're going to be good customers in the future. And so in the near term, they may have tremendous lending needs. They may, they're a great opportunity for us on the mortgage front. Maybe they're buying a first home. But from an investing standpoint, they probably a great solution for them would be some kind of algorithmic trading account, like a robo advisor. So that would be your emerging affluent. Your affluent is kind of your core financial advisor market. These folks, to a large degree, are saving for retirement. They're utilizing, their 401k solution, but they've got additional assets that they want to put to work. And typically, their investing needs are for retirement, for health. For health expenses they may have later in their lives, or maybe something like a second home or a remodel. And again, that's your sort of 250 your 250, and that affluent spectrum can really flex, and it can go all the way up to 10 million dollars. Now at 10 million we start thinking about it very differently. Then it's around, what are your philanthropic giving needs? How are you thinking about the next generation, and what kind of trust or solution you may want to provide there? And then it becomes less about just pure investing and how are you generating great return, but how do you want to use your wealth to express some set of values that you might have? And that could be everything from the kind of impact you want to have in your community from a philanthropic sense to what kind of legacy you want to leave to the next generation. And then at a level even beyond that, in the ultra high net worth space, this would be your 50 million plus. Then it really becomes, and we sort of jokingly refer to these folks as individuals, in the sense that they tend to exhibit the characteristics of both individuals and institutions. In which case you're looking at family office services and really family dynamics, right? How do you want to think about the family meeting? Oftentimes these are family-owned businesses that have been very successful. How do you want to think about that wealth? So that covers the broad category. As you can, I'm sure, appreciate that the big middle, that 250 to 10 million, is pretty broad. And of course, there's going to be gradations and levels of service, within that.
That's great. So for the emerging affluent, you mentioned the typical thing might be a robo-algorithmic advisor. What's sort of the industry standard set of services for that affluent segment?
Well, I think it's certainly it's a financial advisor, and then it kind of depends on someone's specific services. I mean, I think, specific needs. So that financial advisor should hopefully, depending on the institution, but certainly if you're attached to a large bank, and I think this is even true for the registered investment advisor marketplace. It's then, okay, well, what else do you need? Well, tell me about your financial plans. I mean, we spend a lot of time thinking with clients around what their financial needs are likely to be going forward. What are your ambitions? Well, I've got a couple of kids and I want to make sure I'm saving for college. Great. I've got maybe I have a lot of equity tied up in my own business, and so I may not be liquid at the moment, but I'm anticipating a liquidity event over the next 5 to 10 years. So maybe I need some sort of lending capital in the near term. Maybe I'm excited about getting a vacation home where I can spend my summers with my children. Terrific. Let's talk about mortgage on a second home. So I think those are the kinds of things that come into place. And as you can see, or maybe I want to set up a trust for my children. But as you can see, it's really the full suite of banking and investing needs that somebody might have, but understood based on the specific needs of that individual. There are certainly lots of clients out there in that affluent space who are just looking for investment return. And there are lots of providers out there that can help, and there are others that are looking for consultations around a 360 view of their full financial life, and financial life is really just life, because in those examples I mentioned, we're talking about saving for a child's education, we're talking about a second home to create memories with your children. These are things that go well beyond finances. And I think what has been fascinating about the industry that I'm lucky to work in is just how that role of the advisor has evolved over time, where it has evolved from being, this is a bit of a simplification, but in the past, the distant past, it was a stock picker, and now it is really as someone who's got hopefully a very strong view of what an individual's financial needs are. And what their aspirations are, and are then able to sort of offer, counseling and advice on how to reach those needs. And it could be across both investing products and services and banking products and services.
And then in that 10 million to 50 million range, that high net worth but not ultra high net worth range, what's the typical type of offering there? And how?
Yeah. I think it is similar to the affluent, although likely more complex. Usually, the trust requirements are more complicated in that regard. But I think where, pardon me, where we see where I see really fascinating opportunities for wealth advisors to differentiate is around those other kinds of things. Once you've reached that level of affluence, you know, retirement is not a concern. Health savings, not a concern. You may already have the second home, and then I think you're thinking about broader legacy questions. And I think this it gets into this notion of how do you then, and this it gets very you go from the hard world of alpha generation, of the investment world into the a much sort of softer world of how do I want my wealth to express my values? And I find that to be the best articulation of the kinds of services that are provided, insofar as they can be everything from what kind of philanthropic plan do I want to put in place, and how do I optimize that for from a tax perspective? What are the issues that I care about? How do I want to manage my giving? How do I want to think about ESG, environmental social governance? I mean, this has traditionally been, or at least in the past, although it is changing radically and very briskly. This has traditionally been something that was of interest to the high net worth. I think now it is of interest to all, particularly younger generations of investor. And I think also, finally, Will, I think the point about how wealth gets passed on to the next generation becomes a really important consideration, and that's the mechanics of it from a trust perspective, but also what are they? How do you want to think about these sort of intergenerational family dynamics? And how do you get coached along the way? And I think that the really top tier wealth advisors are really attuned to some of those issues, which, as I said, aren't just about sort of maximizing your portfolio return. Of course, that's critical, but really also about how do you think about the legacy you want to leave to your family? And these are, of course, very personal, very thoughtful types of issues.
Okay, that was super fascinating and helpful. Looping back to the data piece that we talked about before, and the theme of our show here today, I'm imagining that there's this spectrum where, with the emerging affluent and with the affluent, it's sort of still a bit of the range of big data where there's just such a large number of those people. But as you get higher up the scale, it becomes maybe a much more defined universe of people, where I'm just imagining that, like, all of the banks and all of the wealth advisors almost have sort of a set of baseball cards for the ultra high net worth people, and they're like named numbers where you could put their pictures up on a wall, kind of a thing, and sort of know, okay, whatever the Jimenez family is currently with whatever BlackRock, and this family, where each family is, and you're tracking them, so it becomes almost less of this big data game and more about a relationship game, and where it's probably hard to pry someone away from another bank and get them to convert to yours. And just curious about that kind of spectrum, where at some ends it's just much more no longer big data, but it's individual by individual, where and then there's probably a place where you're tracking, okay, who signed up for the newsletter. Could you talk about that spectrum a little bit?
Yeah, no, and look, you're absolutely right. I think that the uses of big data are really to allow you to sort of churn through prospects very, very efficiently when the universe is enormous. When the universe is the top several hundred families in the country, and what their wealth needs are likely to be, you're absolutely right. If you're a top tier wealth advisor, you probably know everyone you need to know. And then I think it's into a much more nuanced, but no less strategic sort of set of marketing, capabilities. So, for example, your events strategy becomes really critical. How do you think about creating the environment and content, at in thought leadership, where someone's going to want to come and spend some time with you. I think one of the things I think that has been interesting in the industry is that folks of that level of affluence do appreciate the opportunity to be in an environment with others at that same level of affluence. And so I think if you can create a community around that, such that yes, it's a great event, but what people really enjoy is the fraternity of knowing that they're in a space with others who are facing the same kinds of challenges that they are, right? I mean, I think, there are, tremendous wealth, of course, is a tremendous blessing, but there are real risks to that. And in terms of what it could mean for the next generation. And I think, isn't it wonderful if you can create an environment and where candid conversations of folks who are in a fairly unique situation can have that dialogue. So I think that's definitely something that we think about from a marketing standpoint. I think the other, though, to your point, don't we already know who all these folks are? I think that's true. But then you want to think about, all right, well, if we don't have a relationship with them, how do we think about that? And I think this is where centers of influence marketing becomes really important. If you're a high net worth or an ultra high net worth individual, your accountant is a pretty important person. Your estate lawyer is a pretty important person. How do we ensure, or how does really any sort of wealth management firm ensure that they're on the radar screens of those influencers, if you will, those folks that are going to have a pretty good opportunity to determine if there is an instance in which a family or a high net worth individual is thinking about changing wealth advisors, that you're on the radar screen of a group or set of individuals that are likely to influence that decision. And so that's a kind of a one step removed type of marketing activity, but ensuring in sort of traditional marketing speak that those influencers have got the awareness, consideration, and esteem for the wealth management firm, such that when the situation is present, that the wealth management firm is in the consideration set by virtue of its connection with these folks who influence that decision.
This is such a fascinating world that I have so little experience with. It's really cool. I mean, I could spend the whole day, asking you for stories about how these events are run and who goes to them and what you cover. But I think we need to wrap it up here. Marshall, if folks want to learn more about, your firm and the work that you do, where would you point them online?
Well, certainly, wellsfargo.com, that's my employer. We certainly have a wealth of information there. No pun intended. That's a great spot. I think, if you're interested in how Wells Fargo thinks about the marketplace, the Wells Fargo Investment Institute is a great resource. If you're interested in how we serve, our high net worth, ultra high net worth, the Wells Fargo Private Bank is a great resource, and Wells Fargo Advisors is the core of our wealth management franchise, which is our financial advisors. I would say too that if folks have got specific questions, I'm always happy to connect. You can find me on LinkedIn, Marshall Butler.
All right, we will include those links in the show notes. Marshall, thank you so much for joining today. This was fascinating.
Oh, thank you, Will. I really appreciate you having me, and thanks for your interest.